I can accept phone calls, and apparently I can. I did it yesterday and it worked. So that's good news. Um, and you're welcome to join the program. And it's just almost like a good old fashioned radio talk show, except obviously we're doing this online. But, my goal this year is to build the program and develop an online program that you can basically listen to anywhere you are, whether if you have access to a laptop or a smartphone, which you obviously, I mean, 99.9% of us have. So, I'm very happy and excited about launching this year. It's going to be Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, where I expect to be on the air for at least an hour, engaging either in commentary or inviting on guests. And I have a lot of interesting guests certainly coming up next week, including my good friend, Dr. Jerome Corsi and Dr. Steve Turley and a lot of other surprises. Daniel Greenfield from Front Page Magazine and a lot of other people. So this is going to be our thing. You and I, the listener, the viewer, the follower, the TikToker, the YouTuber, and we can get together here and engage in conversation that not only will be heard by all of our listeners and viewers, but will also be archived on Minds, the Parler app, Podomatic, which goes to iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of these other great servers. And I think that given the fact that if, God forbid, and I'm not there yet, Joe Biden is installed and the election is successfully stolen, I think that it's reasonable to assume that we're going to have a bloodbath against people like me. I think it's a very high likelihood that I'll be taken off the air and you will not see this on YouTube, possibly on TikTok, which is why I am diversifying the numbers of entities and platforms that carry the show. That's why I'm on probably at least 6 or 8 other platforms right now, and also video platforms like Minds and Rumble. And I'm going to be adding to that. I mean, in fact, even this weekend, I'm still investigating. I'm probably going to be on Gab, and there are all these other ones, and D Live, and all of these other ones, both live stream and video archive and platform, so that way, if and when they start to take me down, like they've been doing to others who, are part of our conservative, populist, nationalist movement, that at least I can continue onward and upward with the program. So, I would suggest you look for me there. By the way, Terrence Williams. Yeah, I just got something for him on Parler. And by the way, join my Parler. In fact, they just Twitter just wiped out Dan Bongino's program, and he said to them, "Oh, f you," and he's completely gone with Parler. President Trump is being censored. I mean, they suspended. Do you know that you talk about communistic events? They suspended his Twitter account, so he's now on Parler. I'm on Parler. You should be on Parler. Let's all go to Parler, as long as they're still happening. And let's continue to expand our influence, our reach. It's going to be it's like whack-a-mole. When they hit us down in one spot, we'll pop up on another and just continue to expand our reach. That's really going to be the only way to combat this, because this is what's going to be coming down the pike. And I believe, and if in fact they do install their government, and I'm not there yet, I'm not saying they're gonna, but it does look like the window is closing and the opportunity is growing for them. it's going to get ugly. It's going to get much worse in terms of an expansion of the censorship, of the attack, of the shrinking of opportunity. I mean, I guess apparently Senator Josh Hawley, the sitting U.S. Senator from Missouri, has been told that his new book, which he's planning on getting published, it's not going to be published because he supported Donald Trump. I guess that it's a book about internet censorship. We're not going to have that. So, we are entering into some very, very difficult and perilous times in terms of challenging our individual freedoms, challenging our rights as sovereign American citizens. And we can expect things to get very bumpy. I mean, and I don't blame people for maintaining a certain amount of anonymity. We have lives to live. We have families to be concerned about. We have careers to worry about. I mean, I have less of a worry because I don't care what they do to me as much. But I appreciate someone who actually has a mind of their own, who is in college, who is out there, trying to get a job in a profession, who is surrounded by liberal family members and colleagues and friends, who lives in a liberal state, like my own home state of Massachusetts, and who wants to make something out of their life. I don't blame you for being a little bit reticent about being too open in your beliefs in these times. I'm not claiming it's easy. Look, I mean, to be honest, I had to literally change my last name to do this program so I could protect my family. And this was when Trump was president. I think that if and when, God forbid, Trump is no longer the president, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get more dangerous. It's going to get more lethal. So, what is on your mind this afternoon? This is an open lines program. It's open lines Friday. Friday is a good day to wrap things up and take a look at events. I would just say, let's not be discouraged. Let's not be despondent, although it's easy to feel those kinds of emotions in these times when we see what the mainstream media is doing. But let's just keep in mind that they're very predictable. What they're doing is really to be expected. What else would we expect? And let's reassess, let's recharge our batteries, and let's begin to examine where we are to go in terms of going forward. And that depends on who you are and what your individual circumstances may be. For me, the going forward is doing the show. I'm going to be doing it every afternoon at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time from 12 to 1, live on YouTube and TikTok. The show will be archived on my YouTube channel and on all the other venues, so it'll be there and available. And I should also note that I am writing a quick book. I'm a pretty fast writer, and I am writing a book about this election. What happened? I'm writing about the voter, quote, improprieties. I don't want to use the other word because YouTube might take me off. And I'm going to document it as best I can. And I'm going to before the whole thing slips down the memory hole, just if for no other reason than for my own memory, for my own edification, so I don't start to forget it. Because right now, it's all fresh. You can still get to it. I still have the documents. I still have the information. And so I'm trying to quickly, tie it all into a big fat book, a short book, a pamphlet more like. And it's just rolling off the page. I'm hoping to finish it like this weekend. I mean, I'm already well into it. And I started it just 2 days ago. And I think that once it's available, once it's finished, I will publish it on Amazon Books, assuming they let me, and I've given it a rather innocuous title so that they don't immediately ban it. And at that point, I will be announcing its availability. It'll be very inexpensive. I don't expect it to cost more than $2 or $3. And I'm also going to make it available to select members of the media with the hope that they might interview me and that I can discuss the content. So that's what I'm doing. The question is, what are you doing? What do I think the storm is coming, as in a Trump storm? Look, the evidence continues to pour in every single day that this has been a stolen election. On Monday, we had state officials in Pennsylvania indicate that there had been more than 200,000 votes cast in Pennsylvania for the presidential election than there were voters. Today, there is information that indicates that Wisconsin is on the verge of decertifying their delegation. I don't know if it even matters at this point because, well, I'm going to talk about this in a minute, how they got this through. But nevertheless, it's not going to be over. It's not going to end. We have to continue to investigate this. I don't care if, God forbid, Biden is installed on January 20th, and it does look like that's probably going to happen. We have to continue to work to expose this impropriety, if you get my drift. We have to do it in any way we can. We have to ask our brilliant attorneys who are looking into this, people like Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tonsing, people like Sidney Powell and Rudolph Giuliani and Jenna Ellis, and the other lawyers who are working on this, to continue their research. Maybe we should send them money. Maybe we should help in any way we can. There's a lot of things we can do to make sure that the research continues, to make sure that wherever and whenever possible, lawsuits can be lodged. Although I don't think that that's going to be successful because the entire one thing we've learned from this whole fiasco, sorry about that, is, there we are. Sorry about that. I'm kind of doing this sort of jerry-rigged here. The one thing we've learned from this whole mess is that our judiciary, unfortunately, is as compromised as any other institution. It's not just our election system. So, these things, excuse me, let me just, I dropped my mouse. There we go. So anyway, yeah, I mean, the corruption is vast, it is extensive, and it's across the board. Now, I want to talk a little bit about what transpired at the U.S. Capitol building. Anyone who has been following me on TikTok and on YouTube knows that I have talked about this great day, which was to come up on Wednesday of this week, the day that the Congress, at both houses of Congress, the US House and the US Senate, would sit in joint session and would confirm the electors and thus ratify the election for the next president of the United States. And that leading up to that date, and let me see, thank you for using your platform. You're welcome. Thank you. And by the way, you're welcome to join in. I am taking live phone calls here. You can call the show and comment. 617-396-4958 is the phone number. I'm hoping to really develop a live program with interaction with callers. So if you want to join the program by phone, you're welcome to do that. 617-396-4958. So leading up to that Wednesday, we saw some very positive developments. We saw several states, the 6 states in particular, but the 7th state being New Mexico, vote for alternative slates of delegates to challenge the appointed Biden slates. We saw over 100 US House members, I think it got to almost 140, publicly state that they would join the challenge of these states that these states, according to these delegates, had conducted their elections illegally and unlawfully, and that these 140 odd US House members would be joined first by one senator, that being Josh Hawley of Missouri, but then that number went up to 10 or 12, I believe, at one point. And then, of course, on the day of it, it went up to, I think, 14, when you had the two losing Georgia candidates for Senate, both sitting senators, until the session sworn in, sign on as well. So you had a fairly substantial groundswell of people in both houses who would sign on to the contesting of these elections. Hello, thank you for joining me.
Hi, Charles. This is Phoebe. I called you yesterday.
Hi, Phoebe. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm
sorry
well.
for interrupting you while you're talking.
Not at all. What's on your mind, Phoebe?
Well, I was listening to I was watching a YouTube channel called Rogue News. They were interviewing this gentleman live, and I don't want to name the name of the gentleman because I'm afraid if I name him, that can adversely affect you. Because while they were interviewing this man, YouTube just pulled down the video as they were interviewing him live.
Now, this was Rogue TV, you say?
It's called Rogue News. That's
Rogue
the name
News.
Rogue.
Well, you know, this is, yeah, I mean, Phoebe, this is what's going on. I mean, we have Terrence Williams, who's a prominent African-American blogger and supporter of President Trump, has said that his book is now being banned. We have sitting US Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri being told that his book, which he was about to, is looking for a publisher, is not going to be published by a mainstream publishing house. I mean, this is a US Senator. So I think that what we're seeing is just the beginning of a purge. It's a very communist situation. Look, when these people get into power, it's almost like, Lenin or Hitler or some other socialist taking power. They're going to be book burning. They're going to be looting our ideas. They're going to be trying to censor us. They already are. I mean, we know that they censored, for example, the scandal around Biden's family, particularly his son, Hunter Biden, during the campaign because they thought that could hurt him. In fact, NPR actually came out flat out and said, we're not going to cover this. Can you imagine that? In a free country, they decide we're not going to cover a story that has to do with a presidential nominee. So,
Yeah.
I think we can expect this to happen. The way I'm trying to handle it in the best I can, just as this one guy, sort of, and I think we can all do our part, is I am trying to diversify my platforms. I mean, the program is carried live on both YouTube and TikTok, but I also archive the program on Minds and on Rumble. And I have a Parler account and a Twitter and Facebook. And I have Podomatic, which then sends it up to iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. And I'm trying to line up others. I'm joining Gab. There are other platforms. So that's, I mean, with my idea being that as I continue with this program, if one is taken down, then there are still the others. And I will still be able to, no matter what else happens, there'll be someone out there where I can continue to forge forward. DLive is one, that I'm hearing about. Twitch. I will continue to try to forge forward. My goal is to do this program every single weekday at 12 noon. And that's what I intend to try to do. So, but you're right to point this out. It is very, very concerning and scary out there.
Because my concern about it's like America is slowly emerging as a technocratic scientific dictatorship, where technocrats, scientific professionals are overriding the rule of law, and they're determining who's free and who's not free. And we, the public, is just given into this. And that's my major concern about all of this.
Well, I mean, that's the central concern. I mean, they're going to decide. Look, if you take a look at the socialist, the dictionary definition of socialism before they changed it, by the way, if you look, you have to go
Yeah.
to older dictionaries. Public ownership of the means of production, public ownership of the means of communication, public ownership of the means of distribution. Now, public ownership of the means of communication means just that. They decide what we hear, how we hear it, when we hear it, and the nature of it. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. And it's going to get very, very dangerous and very perilous as we enter into these times, if God forbid they do install this administration. So
Yeah.
it ain't over yet, though, and there's going to be major opposition. If you believe, like I do, and I think the evidence is overwhelming, that Donald Trump won the election in a landslide, that means that there's a lot of people out there who are just like us who are not going to be silenced.
But can I ask you though, Charles, because I know you and I are both in Massachusetts, and Massachusetts I mean, might think differently than me, but I see that Massachusetts is hopelessly left wing. How much of this voter fraud do you think has been in our state elections here in Massachusetts?
Well, we know that Charlie Baker, under the guise of the emergency, the pandemic, which has been used as a means to. This is one of the way they stole it. I mean, the means of governors and judges and bureaucrats moving in with fiat power and changing election laws without the approval of the state legislatures, which is unconstitutional. Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution says that only legislators, state legislators, are to regulate election laws. In Massachusetts, they did like they did in the so-called battleground states. They papered the state with ballots. They opened up these drop boxes. They reduced the means by which people would be verified as voters. They did the same thing. I don't think it mattered so much in Massachusetts because Massachusetts is kind of written off as a blue state. I get that. But it did matter in places like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. And also, I should note that in Massachusetts, even with all of this going on, and I don't think there was a major effort at ballot manipulation here, even though we have the Dominion voting machines here, nevertheless, Trump did better in Massachusetts than he did last time. He did better by 2% in Boston. He did better by 10% or 8% in cities like Lawrence and Hanover and Holyoke and Fall River and New Bedford, because those cities have very large percentages of people of color, particularly Hispanics, where Donald Trump did very well. Now, I think that if you removed the manipulation, the electronic manipulation, which has been very well documented by Sidney Powell and others, and Lynn Wood, and you remove the old-fashioned ballot stuffing that occurred in these battleground states, I think that you'd see that Trump did even better among minorities than we know. And that's something that is absolute anathema to this leftist establishment. That is their entire raison d'etre, their entire calling card is that those who disagree with them, those who don't genuflect in their direction, have something against people of color, which of course is a lie, and which is the biggest piece of propaganda since the Nazi propaganda against the Jews.
I mean, I don't know what precinct you vote in, but when I voted, in the precinct that I voted in, they wouldn't, I volunteered to show them my license as an ID. They said, oh no, we don't need that.
Yeah, the same thing's happened to me. You say, do you need ID? But at least here in Massachusetts, I'll say this. They do check your address. I mean, when you walk into the polling place, you have to announce your name, and they look at a sheet of paper, and they check off your name on the page with your address. Now, we know that, for example, in certain cities, the cities that were targeted, like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I believe Phoenix, Arizona, and possibly Atlanta, Georgia, you had thousands of people show up at the polls, ask for a ballot, and be told that no, they had already voted. In other words, someone had voted for them already. And when they said no, sorry, you can't vote. You're going to have to take a provisional ballot, which means you can only vote for president, and which means it gets counted by who knows who later. The machines don't even process it. And several of the lawsuits that were brought that the left likes to say were dismissed and proved that there was no voter fraud. These lawsuits were brought by these people who said, no, I'm going to talk to a judge. I want my vote. Their vote was suppressed. And the judges just threw it out. They were like, oh, this isn't our jurisdiction. This isn't the right venue. You don't have standing here. And they never heard the evidence. That's the problem. That's why I say that our judiciary, both on the state and federal level, has been severely compromised and corrupted in this process. So, you have, all kinds of voter fraud. I think that in the end of the day, if it was taken away, you'll find that Trump not only won by a landslide, but he won all of the states in question. He probably won several other states, including Minnesota and New Hampshire, and maybe even California. And that the US House would be overwhelmingly Republican. Sidney Powell says that this Dominion uh, impropriety, the electronic voting impropriety, I don't want to use the F word, that this goes back decades, that other nations around the world have banned this technology. They do it the old-fashioned way. They count the vote by hand, and they have voter ID. And that if this whole thing was able to blow open, and I believe it still will, and this is what they're trying to protect, then we're going to find out that there was the F word committed in elections probably going back to the 1990s. I mean, we might recall that in the election of 2012, Barack Obama running against Mitt Romney did so well in certain precincts, particularly in Detroit and Philadelphia, some of the same culprits now, that he got like 98, 99% of the vote. In some cases, maybe 105% of the vote. This was reported in the news after the fact. And the problem is that Mitt Romney didn't do a damn thing about it because Mitt Romney had no spine. And I think that's why Mitt Romney today is so bitter against Trump, because Trump has stood up. He has challenged it. And even if he doesn't make it, it has opened a can of worms, and that's not going to be closed. They are going to have, this will be investigated. We will get to the bottom of it. I believe that, because if we don't, we're never going to have another free election. Anyway,
I
yeah.
agree. That's my fear too, Charles. Is like after seeing what happened in this past election, I'm starting to ponder. Like I've lived in Massachusetts my whole life, and I've always been conservative. I've never been a liberal. And knowing that this state is hopelessly liberal, I'm starting to question, is Massachusetts, given that we know all this voter fraud is going on, is it really as blue as we think it is?
I think it's not. I think that Massachusetts has a long history of gerrymandering and, look, I mean, I can speak to this as somebody who ran for Congress myself back in 2004. It's very corrupt here, always has been, going way back. There's a machine that runs Boston, and that we probably are more red than they will admit. And even in that context, as I say, Trump did better this time. I mean, I think that, look, what can we do? What can we as citizens do? Should we bring lawsuits against Massachusetts and against our states? Maybe. Should we run for office? Yes, I am a very strong proponent of that, especially local office, because one of the things we've learned from this whole fiasco is that our state legislators have plenary responsibilities that they didn't realize they have. And those are in the US Constitution. And they have to do not just with election laws, but with all sorts of laws. And I think that if we have people run for state office, state rep, state senator who understand this, then we're going to really be able to change our system. We're going to be able to do what Donald Trump set out to do. And we're going to be able to begin to move toward furthering his movement, which is to reassert sovereign powers to the people and to remove them from these bureaucrats, because if state legislators start to exercise their power, that'll be huge. So I urge people to consider running for state rep and state senator. And it's not that difficult.
But my other concern too, Charles, is that when a person runs for office, they have to choose between being a Republican or a Democrat.
Not really. I mean, you can run as an independent. I did. Or you can simply, and usually on the state level, it's not. Look, the Republican Party in Massachusetts isn't worth a bucket of spit. I wouldn't pay any attention to them. You know, they're as bad as the Democrats. I mean, they're a complete establishment group. Just you can look, if you run in like a local state rep district, that district is basically your community and maybe one or two other communities that are adjacent. It's not a huge place. You don't have to raise a lot of money. You can go out and knock on doors and just do it. I mean, if you're a retired person, if you're a teenager, if you're a student who has some extra time, if you have a housewife, you know, if you have some extra time, you can do it and you can win. And you will get media coverage where you will get your issues across, whether they like them or not, and that will make change. This is how our system works. This is the democratic principle. And you know, the late Tip O'Neill, U.S. House member, he became Speaker of the House during Reagan's years. Regardless of whether we liked his politics, he did write a book where he talked about this. He talked about all politics is local, and he says that when he first ran for the House in Cambridge and in Somerville, he personally spent a whole year going around and knocking on just about every door in his district. And by the way, we all know that Tip O'Neill was a pretty big guy. I mean, he was he was heavy. I mean, he wasn't in the greatest of health, but he was able to do this. And that's why he won. And he was opposed by the Kennedy machine. They didn't like Tip O'Neill. So the point I'm making here is that it can be done. And if you have the time and the focus, I urge you to do it. It's an exciting experience. It's life-changing. It's really making a difference in your community, and you'll learn so much by going out and meeting your neighbors and shaking their hands, eye-to-eye contact, and listening to their concerns. You're going to learn. It changes you. It's fantastic. It's what changed Trump during the last election. He talked about that, and I believed him, and I understood it because I felt it myself. Going out and meeting people over and over again, thousands of people, it's an incredible experience in functioning government, and that's the only way we're going to save our free republic. You know, freedom and liberty don't grow on trees. I mean, you don't wake up and look out the window and say, "Oh, we're free." You know, we're not. We know this now. You have to use freedom. You have to exercise the levers of democracy in order to make them work.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but I heard one of the podcasters that I listened to said something that struck me. He said that tyranny is normal.
Well, it exists in a vacuum. It's like a satanic influence. It exists when good is not identified.
Yeah, and so it's like when he said that, it really struck me because we have to work for freedom. It's not like it comes by itself. We have to work for it, or else tyranny just comes in. It just does. It's been human nature for thousands of years since the fall of man.
Exactly.
Tyranny is in the nature of fallen man.
Exactly. It's the sin of the serpent. We talked about this yesterday with Adam and Eve. No, yes, it is part of it's the darker side of our nature. And that in order to overcome it, or in order to at least put it in abeyance, we have to work with whatever resources we have at any given time to challenge it. Anyways, Phoebe, I want to thank you for joining me.
Oh, you're welcome. You're
All right.
welcome.
Have a good
You
one.
might see a lot, but you're very welcome. I
Thanks a
hope
lot.
you get more callers.
Yeah,
I
me
hope
too.
you're sure.
Oh,
I hope you
I'm
get-
hoping that's my goal, to get callers, to get people to join the conversation. And
All right.
thanks a lot, Phoebe.
You're very welcome. Take
Um,
care, Charles.
You too.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, and you're welcome to join the program. We're kind of doing an open lines program here. 617-396-4958 is the number. 617-396-4958. Let's see, I got a TikTok. The only issue with Trump I have is his condemnation of Democratic Party. Well, I mean, look, I don't know about that. That's politics. Anyway, to get back to my comments about the events of Wednesday. So we had a delegation of state Senate of U.S. senators. I think it was 12 in total, along with about 140 representatives who were going to challenge the elections in the contested states. And they were Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. And they were joined by a seventh state, that being New Mexico. Apparently, the people of New Mexico, the Republicans anyway, believed that even though New Mexico had been for Biden, and I don't think there was any question about that, they felt that there was some level of corruption there that was sufficient to challenge those results. And that this was something that was done entirely constitutionally. It had been done, there was a lot of precedent for this. In 1960, apparently, the state of Hawaii had been declared for Richard Nixon, but yet there was a delegation that was elected by the Democratic Party of Hawaii to for John F. Kennedy, and that they came to Washington and presented their credentials. In the election of 2004, the election, I believe, of 2009, there was, in the case of 2009, there were two senators, there was Senator Barbara Boxer of California and a Representative Biggs of, I think, Michigan, challenged the results of the election in Ohio with the claim that there had been sufficient levels of voter improprieties there, and that this was heard in the House and struck down after debate. That's how the system is supposed to work. Well, in this particular case, there were unprecedented levels of claims in, as I say, 7 states. And the expectation was that all 7 of these would be heard. And the way the procedure works is that once the challenge is made by a state, by a US House member, and if that House member is joined in writing by a US Senator, then that triggers an automatic debate that can take upwards of 2 hours, by which evidence is presented, evidence is debated, and then there is a vote. Now, the assumption going in the days leading up to this, the wild card, of course, was Vice President Pence, who would be acting as the president of the Senate, of the joint session, and who would literally count the votes. There were a lot of legal scholars who believed that Pence could simply choose not to count the votes in those contested states, or he could even choose to count the Trump votes. Trump has all the cards. You are absolutely crazy if you think otherwise. Oh, God willing, you're right. I'm reading some TikTok here. Pence did not do this. Very disappointing. He shirked from it. He decided he didn't have that kind of power. Even though, the Constitution gives him what's called plenary power, absolute power to do it. He didn't have the guts to do it. I don't know what his motivation is. Maybe he never planned to do it. Maybe he's part of the deep state. We just don't know. We've never heard from him until now. It's very disappointing. But the fact is, he didn't do it. And, but nevertheless, the hearings went forward. And so the first state to be heard in terms of being contested was Arizona because it's done alphabetically. And the Arizona case is a big one. I mean, they have huge improprieties in Maricopa County. I mean, we could go over it, and in fact, I'm going to try to document this in a book I'll be releasing hopefully next week. But it's pervasive. It's been around for a long time, and it was on full display in that state during that election. It was very, very bad. And thus you had the beginning of this presentation. You had a US House member stand up from Arizona and begin to make this presentation. And it was devastating. I was watching it. I was actually doing some broadcasting at the time, so I didn't watch the whole thing. But it was being seen by the whole country. And it was not, it was moving. This was the one moment where finally there was an opportunity for the whole country to see in a setting that would be incontrovertible, it would not be easy to hide from, that the improprieties, as I'd like to say, in Arizona was sufficient enough to have flipped that election, which was a hair's breadth difference. It was like 10,000 vote difference in an election where 3 million votes were cast. And just as things were getting underway, conveniently, what happened? All of a sudden, Antifa extremists burst into the US Capitol and disrupted the proceedings. And they began to, make a mockery. They began to, loot stuff. No, they didn't damage anything. I don't think there were anything burned. I mean, I didn't think they destroyed any property. But they came in and sufficiently disrupted the proceedings to the point where everything came to a stop, right? And everybody left. And then later that night, in the wee hours of the evening, they reconvened and they gavelled the thing through. Now, this to me really, really stinks. I mean, this is just, this is what we've come to. And I don't believe that this just happened. I don't think that these people overwhelmed the Capitol Police or the people that protected the U.S. Capitol. You have a joint session of Congress, our entire government, our entire legislature, all, if not virtually all, of our U.S. House members and our U.S. senators, and you have the Vice President of the United States, all in the same room. And they didn't secure the building, especially in anticipation of this, and especially knowing that there was going to be hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people peaceably protesting in the city. And they didn't bother to secure the building. I don't believe that. I've seen a lot more security here in Boston just to get into, like, I don't know, the Tip O'Neill Federal Building. You don't just storm the building. I mean, you have to take your belt off and put your wallet and your smartphone into a little dish, which they run through a scanner. And then you have to walk through an electronic scanner, for God's sake. This is just to get in to do like routine business in a normal federal building in Boston. And you're telling me that the US Capitol, people just were able to walk in like that? I mean, there's something very and minimal suspicious about that. I mean, we saw last summer radical, Antifa protesters, BLM protesters in Portland, Oregon, looting the Mark Hatfield Federal Courthouse in Portland, throwing garbage at it, spray paint, you know, trying to storm the place. And even though they did physical damage to the exterior, they didn't get anywhere near entering the building. That just wouldn't have happened. Anybody who tried would have been shot. Um, I think it was a couple of years ago that one person tried to get into the U.S. Capitol building, and unfortunately, a security man was shot in the process of stopping him. The point I'm making is that it's so obvious that this couldn't have just happened, that it would have been very, very basic to secure that building. And even liberals admit this. You know, here in Boston, I heard former Boston Police Commissioner Ed Davis say this. I mean, he said this is not possible that this could have happened without some inside support. Congressman Keating, a liberal Democrat from the Cape, uh, said this. He said that he actually interviewed policemen because he's a former cop himself and he's a former prosecutor. He and they assured him that everything was fine in advance and that the place was secured. So then, how is it that this happened? Huh? Hello from Jamaica Plain. Come on down. Call the show. You're welcome to join me. I'm doing this live Monday through Friday, 12 to 1, 12 to 2, whenever. 617-396-4958. 617-396-4958, as we are live doing what I've always loved to do, which is talk and conversation. So come on down. You're welcome to join. What is on your mind this afternoon? 617-396-4958. So getting back to the situation. So you had people, I mean, I'm sorry there's no other way to describe this, but somebody opened the door and let everybody in. I mean, if I had been there and I was at the US Capitol, I probably would have gone in. I mean, it looked like people were being let in. I mean, I wouldn't have gone in there to do any damage, but I would have probably just gone in because the door was open. Okay, I think so. Also, that's why Nancy Pelosi is trying to impeach Trump right now. All right, let me get into that. But the point is that everybody came in, and we've seen pictures of the people in there. We've seen a picture of the guy with the shirtless guy with the Nordic, crown. He looks like Thor or Odin, from the Nordic myth, and he has all kinds of weird tattoos and painted on his body. And the guy standing next to him, that fat guy with the black beard, he has like a hammer and sickle tattoo on his hand. And we've seen some of these other people clad in black leather. They've been matched with Antifa and BLM radicals who had been looting black businesses, burning black neighborhoods, killing black people throughout the summer. And I didn't hear too much outrage at all from people who are now screeching, right? I guess they don't matter, do they? That was okay because they were, protesting mistreatment of black people by police while they killed black people and looted black businesses. That's how they protest. Nothing was said about that. In fact, we even saw CNN do a news segment where they said, these are peaceful protests. And you see the whole place burning in the background. It would have took days to deem the building clear to reconvene. The point is they did reconvene later that night, and they did gavel through their nominee without much debate. And now, and the result has been that it has furthered this hysterical and shrill narrative that has been lodged against President Trump and against his supporters since the moment that he and Melania descended on the elevator at Trump Tower and where he announced his candidacy. and that is that he's evil and he's horrible and that he's a criminal and that whatever else they can think of. Now they are trying to resurrect all of this as he is, we assume, reaching the end of the first term. Let's just put it that way. And they're actually talking about impeaching him when there's only like a week and a half left of the term. Is it just to try to besmirch him further? Is it just to try to put another, mark on the history books that they can use? I mean, I can't even watch the mainstream news. I won't watch it. But I did get a glimpse last night at US Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts. He is a snake. Oh my God, he is vicious. He is brutal. He's hateful. He's soulless. And he's there with that smirk and that rage and that sneer of hate, calling for President Trump to be impeached. Why? Because Trump's to blame for the fact that these people were led into the Capitol building somehow. Hello, thanks for joining me.
Hey, sir, how you doing?
I'm well, thanks. Welcome aboard.
All right. Yeah, I'm Brandon. I live
Hi,
in
Brandon.
St. Louis, and I'm retired military. So that whole fiasco really disturbed me the other day.
Yes, indeed.
And all my buddies, I still got some who are in the military. My daughter just got out last year, but all of my friends, and we was extremely disappointed, upset. And but I have some friends
Yeah.
really are, the deep end on all these conspiracies. Like they can't understand that just because you like something doesn't mean everybody else likes it, right? Like some people like a sandwich made a certain way, some people might not like mayonnaise or mustard. But I have a very big concern about the direction that our country's going, and because if you look at what happened, how that building, those whatever you want to call it, they never got close to that building.
Well, let me ask you this, Brandon. You're a military man, and I thank you for your service to this country. And you've had training in security and in military operations. How is it possible that people just walked into the U.S. Capitol like that? I mean, we saw last summer federal buildings being assaulted by Antifa and BLM in various cities around the country where they looted Black businesses and burned Black neighborhoods, but they didn't get anywhere near federal buildings. Yeah. And we're talking here about the US Capitol, the most important federal building in America, with a full joint session of Congress in session with a vice president. And somehow they're able to walk in just like as if they're off the street. How did that happen, do you think?
I would tell you, obviously, the higher up of that chain of command in that establishment of the Capitol Police. We know that a lot of law enforcement officers do support Donald Trump. And so obviously they didn't think nothing about it. But it seems to me like that the individual that had to resign, that if the FBI really does a real thorough investigation, I'm pretty sure it was some bias. Meaning someone wanted that to happen, or either actually thought that maybe they could get up in there and in the vice president in there, the second most powerful man on planet Earth.
No, exactly. And, I mean, it's absolutely inconceivable that people would, especially that guy with the Nordic horns and these people, that they're just walking into the U.S. lobby there and just strolling around. There was one guy that was sitting on the dais in the U.S. Senate. I mean, that just can't happen by accident. That's like there's something very, very peculiar about that. I mean, I don't know. I know that there was evidence that Antifa buses had arrived in Washington, and that the mayor of Washington knew about that. Where was the FBI? Where was security? Where was the Capitol Police?
I believe that our political system has got so much into everyday talk that people treat it like they're a Yankees fan or a Red Sox fan. And if you're a Yankees fan, you don't never want to believe that the Red Sox ever had a good baseball team. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. I think you have your finger right on it, because the fact is that I think most Americans, unless you were born under a rock somewhere, understand that the election was stolen. And I think that a large percentage of people either don't care, or they have been so, stewed in Trump hatred from the daily dose from the propaganda, that they want this to happen. And then, of course, there are the conspirators who certainly don't want it to happen, because they pulled it off, if assuming they did. But it troubles me that there are so many Americans who don't care, or who want to see it happen, including particularly younger people, college age Americans, high school age. I mean, where are they? What's happened?
Well, I was talking to my buddy last night, and I'm like, this generation now, including I'm 44.
Mhm.
Politics were very boring when I was a kid, but I remember, Desert Storm, and I
Yes.
remember Bush not getting reelected. And
Mhm.
I'll say probably the reason why he didn't get reelected was because you still had a lot of veterans alive, World War I and World War II, and then in Vietnam and the Korean War,
Right.
and they didn't want us, to deal with, put our Americans on the front lines for war and stuff like that. And I think that's why he didn't get reelected. And a lot of those people died; they're gone now, especially those World War I, World War II, and those Korean War veterans. And then then in politics it got kind of popular with Clinton, playing the saxophone, being on MTV, and then we had a big war when Bush came in, and then politics got even more popular when Obama was in office. And I'm not talking about people's policies. I'm just saying people who had they was very charismatic or whatever.
Mhm.
And then you had the 24 news cycle, so it's everywhere. People can't run from it.
Yeah.
But in me, I am the guy in the middle. Okay, I got 5 children. 2 of them are very successful, and they're 22, my twins, and I got 3 in the house. And I don't know no more of a Christian woman than my wife. She loves Jesus Christ. That's her Lord and Savior. But there is something that it's just gotten to the point to where if you're a Republican, then you must be a racist, or if you're a black person, you must be on welfare, and you probably had 10 abortions. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
and all these dog whistles for everything. If you see a guy that has a pickup truck or something, and you have this way, or someone who has 10 on the windows. And I just think that one, it's hard for us as humans to process all this information. It's I am very adamant about how the police treat the civilians of this country. That really bothers me.
Yes.
But like yesterday, it seemed to me that the leadership of the Capitol Police allowed that to happen because the guy was a big, Trump supporter, whatever, and he wanted the same results that Trump wanted. But people sit here and talk about the Constitution all the time, but they don't read it. They just care about the First Amendment and the Second Amendment.
Well, I have to take issue with you on one thing, Brandon. I don't think that whoever was behind letting people into the Capitol were Trump supporters, because if they were, they would never have let this happen. And that's putting aside whether or not the people in the Capitol were Trump supporters or whether they were Antifa. I think that the bad players were probably Antifa. You had average people who followed them in, like, for example, Ashley Babbitt, who was shot dead in cold blood right at Statuary Hall. You know, she just went in because the door was open and you could go in. I would have gone in probably. Um,
Well, I think the video that also, and but um, the police have the right to protect themselves.
well, the point is that they could have very easily sealed that building just like they do any
Yes, of
federal
course.
building in this country. This was not,
Yes,
there's no excuse for this. And the fact that
no,
they
it's not.
didn't do it says something about an agenda. I don't think it's a coincidence, for example, and I'm sorry if people think I'm putting a little tin hat on here and doing a conspiracy theory, but it just seems to me to be rather ironic that the minute that the Arizona delegation stepped up and they decided to present their evidence of voter impropriety, I don't want to use the F word because I could get banned at YouTube. The minute they started doing this, you had everybody bursting into the Capitol, and it was whole thing was brought to a stop. I don't think that's a coincidence. I'm sorry, but I think that we never got to hear the evidence. We didn't get to hear it in a courtroom because both the state and federal system had punted the ball. They didn't hear the evidence. They just dismissed these cases on technical grounds. So we have never had in this country a venue where where the evidence can be heard. And that way you have liberals and pro Biden people say, well, there was never any evidence. We've never heard the evidence publicly. And the only legitimate venue by which the evidence should be heard is either in a courtroom or in the well of the US House of Representatives. And that's been denied us. Anyways, Brandon, listen, I really thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it. Please call again. Don't be a stranger. Tell your friends. I'm doing this every day at 12 noon. Thanks a lot, Brandon.
All right, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
All right, you too. Okay. And we still have time for another call if you'd like to join us. 617-396-4958 is the number. 617-396-4958. We've covered a lot of issues here. It's a Friday. I don't have a guest today, so it's an open lines program. I've got some interesting people lined up for next week. I'm going to be doing this and have been doing it this week every afternoon at 12 noon sharp, Eastern Standard Time. And being the internet, I could stay on. I could continue to run right up past 1 o'clock. But my goal is at least to do it till 1 o'clock. And I'm at the 1 o'clock hour now, so I'm probably going to start to wrap it up. But as I said, it's on Monday through Friday, 12 noon to 1 Eastern Time, heard nationally, heard internationally. I think that I've been told I'm the only person who's doing a live program at YouTube and TikTok that takes calls. I'm taking the calls. It's amazing. And here I am, just some guy sitting here basically with a laptop. You can call in at 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. And of course, the program is archived on my YouTube channel, on Minds, and on Rumble. Those are two apps. And on Podomatic, where it's heard on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Google, a bunch of other audio sites if you listen to podcasts. And I'm going to be expanding that as time goes on so that I can make sure that I'm diversified to the point where if anyone pulls the show, it goes on. The show must go on. Yes, Trump has options. Indeed. It's not over until it's over. I mean, we've got news coming in out of Wisconsin today, another 100,000 votes were discovered. We have continuous news in Pennsylvania. It ain't over yet. It ain't gonna be over until the day of the installation, if in the case of Biden, or the inauguration if it's President Trump. And I'm certainly not going to let up, and I hope that none of you do either. Don't be discouraged. Don't pay any attention to the haters who are shrill and who are overplaying their hand. And let's continue to do what we can to ensure that we have freedom and that we take back our republic. So anyway, I guess on that note, I want to thank you all for joining me this afternoon. Please join me when I shall return, God willing, next Monday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, right here at YouTube and at TikTok. Um, please consider calling the show. I'm hoping to develop a live call-in type show and tell your friends to call and your family and your colleagues. Let's make this into a great experience where we can really share ideas. 617-396-4958. In the meantime, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Please subscribe on TikTok. And please, you are welcome to check out my books. They're available at Amazon Books. I've written over 15 books, some of which are quite relevant to this whole scam. And thank you very much, everyone. Thank you on TikTok. Have a great afternoon. And thank you on